Mark Zuckerberg thought he could quietly destroy Marjorie Taylor Greene's political career by shadow banning her content and restricting her reach on Facebook. What happened next triggered a congressional investigation that cost Meta $180 billion and exposed the biggest censorship scandal in social media history. The Meta headquarters in Menlo Park buzzed with its usual controlled chaos on that crisp Tuesday morning in February. Engineers hunched over multiple monitors while content moderators reviewed thousands of posts per hour. In the executive conference room on the 15th floor, Mark Zuckerberg sat at the head of a mahogany table surrounded by his top lieutenants for what they internally called a content strategy meeting. The topic of discussion was Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, the controversial Georgia congresswoman whose social media presence had become a constant source of headaches for Meta's content moderation team. Her posts regularly went viral, generating millions of engagements and driving massive traffic to Facebook and Instagram. But they also attracted criticism from liberal activists, mainstream media, and Democratic politicians who accused Meta of platforming dangerous misinformation. "She's becoming a liability," said Nick Clegg, Meta's president of global affairs, sliding a thick folder across the table to Zuckerberg. "The pressure from Congress is intensifying. Senator Warren's office calls twice a week demanding we take action. The New York Times is preparing another exposé about our failure to combat extremism." Zuckerberg flipped through the folder, which contained screenshots of Greene's recent posts, engagement metrics, and internal memos from the content moderation team. Her numbers were undeniable. Her posts regularly received more engagement than those of mainstream politicians, and her followers were among the most active users on the platform. "What are our options?" Zuckerberg asked, his voice carrying the detached analytical tone he used when discussing what he saw as technical problems rather than human issues. "We could suspend her account," suggested Joel Kaplan, Meta's vice president of global public policy. "Cite violations of our community standards." "Too obvious," Clegg replied. "She'd make herself a martyr claim we're censoring conservatives. The backlash would be enormous." That's when Alex Stamos, a senior director in the content moderation division, proposed what he called the elegant solution. "If we don't ban her," he said, pulling up a presentation on the conference room's massive screen. "We use algorithmic suppression, reduce her reach gradually, limit her posts distribution, and shadow ban her content. She'll still be on the platform so we can't be accused of censorship, but her influence will be neutralized." Zuckerberg leaned back in his chair considering the proposal. It was the kind of technical solution he preferred. Complex enough that the average user wouldn't understand it, plausibly deniable if questioned, and effective at achieving their goals without obvious fingerprints. "How would it work?" he asked. Stamos clicked to the next slide. "We modify the algorithm to flag her content as low quality without human review. Her posts get buried in the feed shown to fewer followers, excluded from trending topics. We can reduce her organic reach by 70–80% without her even knowing. And if she complains, we tell her it's just algorithm changes, normal fluctuations in engagement. Happens to everyone. She can't prove intentional suppression without access to our internal systems, which she'll never get." Zuckerberg nodded slowly. "Implement it. Start with a 50% reduction in reach and see how she responds. If she doesn't notice, we can increase it." What they didn't anticipate was that Marjorie Taylor Greene had been tracking her social media metrics obsessively for months, maintaining detailed spreadsheets of engagement rates, reach statistics, and follower growth. She noticed the changes within 48 hours. Greene was in her congressional office when her digital director, a sharp young woman named Sarah Collins, knocked on her door with a laptop showing concerning data. "Ma'am, something's wrong with your Facebook metrics," Collins said, setting the laptop on Greene's desk. "Your engagement is down 60% since Tuesday, but your follower count is still growing. Your posts are getting buried in people's feeds." Greene studied the numbers, her expression growing darker as she realized what was happening. "They're shadow banning me." "It looks that way," Collins confirmed, "but we can't prove it without internal access to their systems." Greene leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Actually, we can prove it. And we're going to do it in a way that destroys their credibility forever." That afternoon, Greene posted what appeared to be a routine message about an upcoming committee hearing. But hidden in the post metadata, her team had embedded tracking code that would monitor exactly how Facebook's algorithm treated the content. It was a digital honeypot designed to catch Meta in the act of suppression. The results were immediate and damning. The tracking data showed that Greene's post was being shown to less than 15% of her followers, despite having engagement rates that should have triggered widespread distribution. The algorithm was actively suppressing her content in real time, but Greene didn't reveal her evidence immediately. Instead, she spent the next 2 weeks documenting the suppression building and airtight case with timestamps, screenshots, and technical data that would be impossible for Meta to deny or explain away. Then she struck. On a Thursday morning, Greene called a press conference in the House Radio TV gallery, announcing it only an hour beforehand to prevent Meta from preparing a response. When reporters arrived, they found her standing behind a podium with a stack of documents and a laptop connected to a large monitor. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "I'm here today to expose the biggest censorship scandal in social media history. Mark Zuckerberg and Meta have been secretly suppressing my content, manipulating their algorithms to silence a sitting member of Congress." She clicked to her first slide showing her engagement metrics over time. 2 weeks ago, my Facebook reach dropped by 60% overnight. My posts, which regularly received hundreds of thousands of views, were suddenly being seen by only a fraction of my followers. The room was completely silent, reporters frantically taking notes. "At first I thought it might be a technical glitch," Greene continued. "But then I did something that Mark Zuckerberg never expected. I started tracking their algorithm in real time." She clicked to the next slide showing the technical data her team had collected. "What we discovered is that Meta has been using what they call algorithmic suppression to silence conservative voices without technically banning them. They reduce our reach, bury our content, and limit our ability to communicate with our own followers." She pulled out a thick folder. "But here's where it gets really interesting. We've been monitoring not just my account, but dozens of other conservative politicians, commentators, and activists. The pattern is undeniable. If you're a conservative with a large following, Meta is actively suppressing your content." Greene walked closer to the cameras. "This isn't just about me. This is about election interference. This is about a tech billionaire using his platform to manipulate political discourse to decide which voices Americans get to hear and which ones get silenced." She clicked to another slide showing internal Meta communications that her team had obtained through sources within the company. These are actual emails from Meta executives discussing their content strategy for conservative politicians. They specifically mentioned me by name, discussing how to neutralize my influence without obvious censorship. The room erupted with questions, but Greene held up her hand. "I'm not finished, because what I'm about to show you proves that this goes all the way to the top." The next slide showed a meeting agenda from Meta's executive team with Zuckerberg's name at the top and MTG suppression strategy listed as a discussion item. "Mark Zuckerberg personally approved the decision to suppress my content," Greene said, her voice rising. "He sat in a meeting with his executives and decided that a sitting member of Congress was too dangerous to be allowed to communicate freely with her constituents." She turned to face the cameras directly. "This is bigger than partisan politics. This is about whether we're going to allow tech billionaires to control American democracy. Mark Zuckerberg has appointed himself the arbiter of acceptable speech, and he's using that power to interfere in our elections." Greene closed her folder. "I'm calling for an immediate congressional investigation into Meta's censorship practices. I'm demanding that Mark Zuckerberg testify under oath about his company's manipulation of political content. And I'm asking every American who believes in free speech to hold Meta accountable for this assault on our democracy." The response was immediate and explosive. Within hours, Meta censorship was trending globally. Conservative politicians from across the country began sharing their own stories of suppressed content and reduced reach. Tech journalists started investigating Meta's content moderation practices. Even some liberal voices expressed concern about the implications of algorithmic censorship. But the real impact came from Congress. Within 48 hours, the House Judiciary Committee announced a formal investigation into Meta's content moderation practices. The Senate Commerce Committee scheduled hearings on social media censorship. State attorneys general began opening their own investigations into whether Meta had violated consumer protection laws. The financial consequences were swift and brutal. Meta's stock price plummeted 15% in 3 days as investors worried about regulatory backlash and potential antitrust action. Major advertisers began pulling their campaigns, citing concerns about the platform's credibility. Even some Democratic politicians worried about the precedent of algorithmic censorship distanced themselves from Meta. But the most damaging revelation came when Greene's team released audio recordings of internal Meta meetings where executives discussed targeting other conservative figures. The recordings obtained through whistleblowers within the company showed a systematic effort to suppress conservative content while amplifying liberal voices. Zuckerberg tried to control the damage with a hastily arranged press conference where he denied any intentional bias and claimed that algorithm changes were routine and applied equally to all users. But his explanation was immediately contradicted by the technical evidence Greene had released. The breaking point came when a group of Meta engineers, horrified by what they'd been asked to do, came forward with internal documents showing the extent of the censorship program. The documents revealed that Meta had been suppressing not just Greene's content, but that of dozens of conservative politicians, journalists, and activists. 3 weeks after Greene's initial press conference, Zuckerberg was called to testify before Congress in what became the most contentious tech hearing in history. Under oath, faced with overwhelming evidence, he was forced to admit that Meta had been using algorithmic suppression to reduce the reach of certain political content. "We made mistakes in our content moderation approach," he said, his usual confidence completely absent. "We're committed to ensuring that all voices are heard equally on our platform." But it was too late. The damage to Meta's credibility was irreversible. The company faced multiple congressional investigations, state and federal lawsuits, and a massive advertiser boycott. Within 6 months, Meta's market value had dropped by over $180 billion. More importantly, the scandal triggered broader reforms in social media regulation. Congress passed the Social Media Transparency Act, requiring platforms to disclose their content, moderation practices, and provide appeals processes for suppressed content. The FTC imposed massive fines on Meta for deceptive practices. The company was forced to submit to external audits of its algorithm. In her first major interview, after Zuckerberg's testimony, Greene was asked what she'd hoped to accomplish by exposing Meta's censorship. "I wanted to show the American people what's really happening behind the scenes at these tech companies," she said. Mark Zuckerberg thought he could quietly silence conservative voices without anyone noticing. "But when you mess with a member of Congress who knows how to fight back, you're going to face consequences." She continued, "This was never just about me. It was about every American who's had their voice suppressed by big tech. It was about preserving the free speech that makes our democracy possible." The interviewer asked if she felt vindicated by Meta's financial losses. "I feel vindicated by the truth coming out," Greene replied. Mark Zuckerberg spent years telling Congress that Facebook doesn't censor conservative voices. Now we have proof that he was lying under oath. She paused. "The $180 billion loss isn't punishment, it's accountability. When you attack the First Amendment, when you try to manipulate American democracy, there have to be consequences." Kripeton. The lesson was clear. In an age of digital democracy, even the most powerful tech companies aren't immune to exposure when they overreach. And when someone with political power and technical knowledge fights back against censorship, the truth has a way of destroying carefully constructed corporate narratives. Mark Zuckerberg thought he could quietly destroy Marjorie Taylor Greene's political influence through algorithmic suppression, believing that his technical complexity would provide perfect cover for political censorship. Instead, he triggered the biggest scandal in social media history and proved that when you attack someone who knows how to fight back, your entire empire can crumble. Greene's systematic exposure of Meta's censorship became a masterclass in how to hold big tech accountable, proving that sometimes the best response to digital manipulation is old-fashioned investigative work combined with political power and the courage to fight back against seemingly untouchable corporate giants.